There's a certain dread that comes with working the graveyard shift at a remote gas station. It's the kind of place where the nearest town is miles away and the road outside stretches on forever, swallowed by the darkness on either end. That's where I found myself one winter night, working alone, when the terror began. I'd taken the job out of desperation. I needed the money and figured that a few hours at a lonely gas station wouldn't be so bad. The manager told me about some weird occurrences, a flickering light, strange sounds now and then, but it all seemed harmless. Until it wasn't. It started around midnight when a car pulled in, old and rusted, with a rattling engine that sounded like it was on its last breath. The driver, a middle-aged man with an unkempt beard and a vacant stare, shuffled inside to pay for gas. He didn't say a word, just slid a crumpled bill across the counter. His hands were filthy, and his eyes, they seemed hollow, like he wasn't all there. He filled up and drove off, leaving the place in dead silence again. But then, just as I was about to settle back into my chair, I heard a faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the back door. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable. But then it grew louder, more insistent. Tap, tap, tap. I walked over, half expecting to find some stray animal scratching at the door, but when I opened it, there was nothing. Just the cold, biting wind. I shrugged it off and went back inside, locking the door behind me. A few minutes later, the tapping started again, this time from the front glass window. I snapped my head towards the sound, and there he was, the man from the car, standing inches away from the glass, staring in at me with that same vacant look. I shouted through the window, "We're closed," but he didn't move. He just kept staring, his eyes drilling into me like he could see right through my skin. I grabbed the phone to call the police, but as soon as I picked it up, the line went dead. Panic set in. I reached under the counter for the bat we kept there for emergencies and slowly backed away from the window. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. I fumbled for the flashlight, my hands trembling, and managed to switch it on just in time to see the man step away from the window. He vanished into the darkness beyond the reach of the beam. My breathing was ragged, my pulse pounding in my ears as I stood there, gripping the bat. I tried to rationalize what was happening, telling myself he was just some lunatic trying to scare me. But then, out of the silence, I heard it again, tap, 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 this time coming from all around, like it was echoing through the walls. I was about to make a run for the back door when the power came back on and the lights flickered to life. That's when I saw it written on the window in what looked like blood, "You're next." My heart sank as I realized the message wasn't addressed to anyone else. It was meant for me. I didn't stay to find out what would happen next. I grabbed my keys, dashed to my car, and tore out of that place without looking back. The manager called me the next morning, asking why I left the station unlocked. I didn't know how to explain what had happened, so I lied, said there'd been a family emergency. I never returned to that gas station. In fact, I left town altogether. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when everything is quiet, I still hear the tapping, always getting closer, always coming back. In the fall of 1998, in the small town of Millfield, Ohio, a local inn called the Old Creek Lodge became the center of an eerie mystery that still haunts the residents to this day. The lodge was known for its rustic charm and cozy rooms, nestled near the dense Millfield forest. The owner, Emma Mathers, had run the place for over 20 years without any strange occurrences until a peculiar guest checked in one late October evening. The man arrived just before dusk, wearing a faded gray coat and carrying a worn leather suitcase. He had a gaunt appearance, with pale skin and sunken eyes that seemed to be swallowed by darkness. When Emma greeted him at the reception, he barely spoke, simply signing the register with an unsteady hand. J. Thornton. Emma assigned him room 4, a modest space overlooking the forest, and noticed a chill creep into the lobby as the man walked away. That night, Emma's daughter, Lily, who worked as a housekeeper, heard strange noises coming from room 4. It was a low, rhythmic humming, almost like a chant. When she knocked on the door to offer extra blankets, there was no response. She left a note, but the next morning, she found the note still hanging on the door handle, untouched. Mr. Thornton was not seen the entire next day, which was unusual, as most guests would venture out or at least come down for breakfast. By the third day, Emma began to worry. She knocked on the door and, receiving no answer, used the master key to enter. The room was immaculate, with the bed perfectly made and no signs of the guest. However, the suitcase was still there, placed neatly in the corner. Inside the suitcase were peculiar items: a faded photograph of an old house, a cracked pocket watch set to 3:15, and a journal filled with strange symbols and drawings of the lodge itself. But from a time long before it was renovated. The most disturbing part was the final entry in the journal. "Tonight, the forest will call me back." Emma immediately contacted the local authorities, who conducted a search of the surrounding forest, but found no trace of Mr. Thornton. The guest register confirmed his name, but there was no record of anyone named J. Thornton in the nearby towns. The photograph in the suitcase depicted a house that the older residents of Millfield recognized. It had stood where the old Creek Lodge was now, before it burned down in 1898, exactly 100 years earlier. Rumors spread that J. Thornton was the spirit of a man who had perished in the original house fire. Some claimed that he had returned to complete unfinished business, while others believed he was seeking vengeance for a past wrong. Over the years, several guests reported seeing a man in a gray coat wandering near the lodge at dusk, only to vanish into the forest without a trace. The legend of the disappearing guest became a local folklore, with many visitors now coming to the Old Creek Lodge in hopes of encountering the elusive spirit. Despite renovations and changes in ownership, Room 4 has remained untouched, its door permanently locked. To this day, the journal sits on display in the lodge's lobby with its final haunting words: "Tonight, the forest will call me back," serving as a reminder that some mysteries are never meant to be solved. The town of Millfield remains divided, with some believing the story to be a clever hoax, while others insist that the guest who checked in on that cold October night was not of this world. Emma Mathers, now in her late 70s, still runs the inn and refuses to speak of that autumn evening. But every year, on the anniversary of Mr. Thornton's arrival, she places a candle in the window of room 4, as if waiting for him to return or to make peace with whatever haunts the Old Creek Lodge.